Cheers, big ears. It's the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week we are heading into the world of print. Well, not completely. My guest this week is Mike Yoshida, who is a longtime snowboard photographer and also happens to have the role of photo editor over at Snowboarder magazine. On the show, we talk about what it took for a kid from Alaska with no training in photography to make it in the world of snowboarding. Before we get into the show, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement and share my posts on Facebook, which no one seems to want to do. If you have anything that you want to tell me, please email me. My email address is mike@thepowellmovement.com. And now I need to thank my sponsors, and I'm excited to share with you that I have 2 new sponsors this winter that will be extending amazing offers to you so you can get discounts on their product, and they are Spy and Outdoor Research. They go along with Evo, Rescue Water, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk to Mike Yoshida. Did you just get back from vacation?
Yeah, I was just in Hawaii.
Nice. Where'd you go?
We went to Oahu and bounced around. We started over in Kailua and then went to the North Shore, and then we ended up in Waikiki at the end.
Did you surf?
A little bit. I'm just not used to surfing over there. It's a little bit reefy. Well, it's very reefy, so it's kind of intimidating alongside the locals and stuff. So
That's like saying to someone who snowboards a little bit and they go to Alaska, it's like, hey, did you go take a heli?
yeah, for sure. But it was super fun, and it's always fun to surf different spots. So kind of learn a little bit every time you surf somewhere different, I guess.
Well, cool. I want to find out all about you, and we're going to start back in Homer, AK, because I think that's where you were born and raised. To me, knowing a lot of different people over the years from Alaska, everyone seems to have a little screw loose, except for you from what I've known, because I've met you on multiple occasions, and you don't have that Alaska weirdness that keeps you out till 6 a.m. partying. But how was life growing up in Alaska?
For the record, I was born in Anchorage, but when I turned 1, my parents moved down to Homer. My dad's from LA, my mom's from Japan, and when they met, my dad had always wanted to just move to Homer, Alaska, because he had traveled around and somehow ended up there. So that's kind of how we ended up in Homer. But yeah, growing up in Alaska, it's just an interesting place. It's just a world of extremes. You have literally total darkness in the winter. Sun comes up at 11, goes down at 3 during winter solstice. So you would go to school in the dark and you would come out of school and it'd be dark. So it's just really extreme. When you grow up there, that's all you know. It's not until I left that I knew how gnarly that was. But then in the summertime, you have the offset of total light. It doesn't really ever get dark. There's a little bit of dusk during the late hours, but it's pretty much the sun stays up all day. So that is one of the defining factors of Alaska, I feel like, as far as like how people live their lives, deciding what they're going to do. It's small town Alaska, so it's not a whole lot to do, but I found snowboarding and latched onto that because it was just really fun, and it was kind of booming at the time when I lived in Alaska. So there was a lot of cool media coming out and a lot of hype and progression in snowboarding. Not that I was really even that good at the time, but I was just really excited about it. There was a lot of excitement around it back then.
We're talking the late 90s when everything is blowing up.
Yeah, and in this day and age, media is so instant and fast, but back then we had to wait for the videos. You get the VHS. One of your friends would get it. They bring it to school, and you'd like roll it out on one of those carts with a little square box TV, sit around in pottery class at the end and like watch this video like 20 times. And that was kind of your Instagram, but you got it once a year, So there was just a lot of excitement around snowboarding back then. And I mean, it's still exciting, but when something's in its infancy and progressing at such a rapid rate and becoming so popular, it's definitely kind of like the golden years in my eyes.
Yeah, you're riding that wave and seeing it from the beginning and being a part of it, which is cool. I'm going to jump back to one thing in Alaska. We talked about the night and day there and how it never ends. When you look back, I know like people from Seattle leave Seattle and they miss the rain. Do you miss the light patterns, or is that miserable to you?
It sounds so daunting to me. Not necessarily the summertime months, but Man, the wintertime just does not sound appealing whatsoever. You have to be a special type of person to be able to endure those winters and stay sane. I think a lot of people just dive into their work. A lot of people are good at just doing outdoor activities in the dark, whether it's cross country skiing or going on runs and just trying to stay active as much as possible through that time. And then I feel like a huge chunk of people just turn to alcohol and drugs. And that's why there's so many people with screws loose that come out of Alaska.
Growing up, skateboarding and snowboarding are your things. Is that correct, or is that just a guess?
I probably would have gotten into snowboarding a lot younger, but I just didn't really have a ton of support from my parents. Like, they didn't really want to buy me a snowboard. I begged them and I finally got one. They bought me like the crappiest hollow body black snow with no metal edges. I was so stoked. I saw it in the videos. I was like, okay, it's going down. Dropped into my driveway, couldn't turn, just fell right on my face, and was just like, okay, well, snowboarding is really not that cool, I guess. Just because I didn't have the right equipment. It wasn't until maybe like 3 or 4 years later when I finally could work and save up my own money to buy an actual board. Then it clicked and I was like, okay, I got a board with metal edges, and skateboarding actually came after that, but it wasn't until maybe like in my early 20s when I really started to skate, but that was just purely out of financial reasons. Like, it was just cheaper than snowboarding.
What kind of kid were you in high school? Did you get in any trouble, anything like that, or you just do the right thing?
I was a pretty bad kid, and I was a really bad kid in high school, actually. I loved to party. I was kind of wrapped up in that whole snowboarder skater lifestyle. It was very rebellious. I mean, back then, like skateboarding and snowboarding really weren't the cool things to do. You'd actually get looked down on doing any of that or made fun of. It just wasn't accepted. I mean, people just didn't understand it. Right then and there, if you identified yourself with a skater or a snowboarder, you were already an outcast. So that immediately ostracized you to most everyone in high school except for your little clan. I mean, high schools are cliquey, but imagine a high school that has 300 kids. I mean, you're really scaling down to just like, all right, I have 5 friends that skate. But yeah, I mean, I just wasn't really the best kid. I gave my parents a lot of grief.
What did you get in trouble for? Did you get like suspended, or were there fights, or what was the deal? What were you a bad kid for?
Yeah, I was just never a fighter for sure, but got suspended. I got arrested for drinking, just really stupid stuff like that, where I look back on it and I can't even believe that I did some of that stuff.
But that's what kids do back then, especially in Alaska, I would think.
I mean, there's just not a whole lot to do for a young kid. I mean, that's why I took to skateboarding and snowboarding. But aside from that, I wasn't really into team sports. You go to school and then you have all this extra time. So what do you end up doing? And that's just kind of the crowd I fell into. But yeah, I wasn't the best kid.
And then I heard at some point, and I'm going to guess it's when you were in high school, but usually when I make these guesses, I'm wrong, and then you correct me. But you get hurt at some point skateboarding and you need something to do, so you find photography?
This when I had moved to Washington State, I randomly picked Western Washington to go to school, knowing that Mount Baker was nearby, but I kind of had no knowledge of like the lore and legend of what Mount Baker was or how good snowboarding was there. I was more so just moving there because it was close to home. It's really close to Alaska, and I had quite a few friends going there, so it made it an easy choice to head down there.
Did you head down there right out of high school?
I knew that Alaska wasn't a place that I wanted to stay forever. I just needed to get out of there. I could just tell the way things were going, like drinking and drugs and all that. It was just smoking weed. Luckily back then there was no hard drugs around in my crowd, or like I didn't know how to get that stuff or necessarily had the money to get it anyways. So that wasn't really a problem, but I just knew that I just wanted to get out and see the world, see something different. Washington was a good opportunity because I had gotten accepted to the school there and I had friends going there. My parents kind of forced me into going to school. They said either you go to school or you're on your own. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
They pay for it?
They did pay for it, but a lot of it was subsidized by the Permanent Dividend Fund. In Alaska, every man, woman, and child get a $2,000 check from the government just for being a citizen. most of my friends would get their permanent dividend fund every year and they would spend it on toys and snowboards and whatever. But my parents wouldn't let me have any of it. I think they invested it and it like did really well. So that was kind of my college fund. Long story short, I didn't really even end up using most of it because I dropped out of college pretty much within the year. It just wasn't for me. Like some people just aren't meant for that. And I think in this day and age, it's better for a kid right out of high school who has no idea what they want to do to actually just like live their life and experience life, even if they're working a crappy job or whatever, to go through that. And then you'll kind of learn what you want to do. But for me, I was just kind of thrown into it. And my parents were very adamant about me going to college. And I was not super into it and didn't know what I wanted to do. So obviously I wasn't going to do very well. So dropped out.
And you're in Bellingham at this point.
Yeah, I'm in Bellingham and my parents were like, "Oh, what are you going to do? We're cutting you off. No more money to help out with living expenses or whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, it's fine. I'm just going to get a job and just live my life and it's okay. I'm going to survive. I'm not just going to like wither away and die."
Right.
That's when I started skateboarding a lot because I didn't have any money and support. And yeah, I would have loved to go to the mountain, but it was just, even though a lift ticket at Mount Baker back then was probably like $30, it was still too much for me. Didn't have a car. So skateboarding was my outlet, my release. And I ended up befriending a bunch of people down there. We kind of moved in together and had a little skater house. And we were just skating every day. And sure enough, I think I was like 19 and we were skating in a spot and I just blew up my ankle. It was one of the most painful things ever. And I ended up going to the hospital, like did a bunch of ligament damage. I was going to be out for like 4 months with a boot on. Ended up taking about a full year for like actual rehab. And yeah, in that time, my friend Kevin Foss that I lived with, he was way into photography. So I was like, okay, like I see him taking all these awesome photos. I think I can do that. And then out of the blue, my dad just sent me a camera, like a pretty nice Canon SLR film camera. And he just kind of threw it in the mail and sent it to me, knowing that I would use it and kind of take up some of that time, try and be productive and positive while I'm healing. So that's kind of how I first started taking pictures.
And do you get fully into photography when you get that camera from your dad? Are you trying to figure out all the details of the camera? Or is it just something you're taking out when your friends are skating and you're going to get some shots?
Not super serious, just kind of an extra hobby to have while I'm passing the time. I mean, never really even was shooting skating. I would just shoot landscapes or just whatever I saw, like just street photography around Bellingham or whatever. I think that I held skate photography in such a high regard, and I also didn't want to be tortured by like seeing skateboarding while I was hurt.
Yep.
But I think I always thought it was like very difficult to shoot action. It's kind of intimidated, I think, for a bit.
It's all film back then, so
yeah,
you're not seeing your images right then. It's a totally different world, and you have to actually be a lot smarter, I would think. Maybe not smarter. You have to be more skilled with the tools than maybe you do today, where you just have to know the programs a little better.
Yeah, for sure. And just more resourceful. I mean, there was no internet to like check out some YouTube tutorials or whatever. So it was very much like slow going trial and error for me. Like save up, buy a couple rolls of film and then get them developed and then see what my mistakes are and then try and tweak that. But then like just the learning curve is so much slower back then when you have to wait for your developing film, then try and remember what settings you had. Maybe you're writing down those in like a notepad so you can compare to your next roll. I mean, back then, the real pros didn't want people to know what you were doing or how to do it. And it was easy to hide your secrets because it was so technical and different.
Well, real quick, I am going to talk about my first set of sponsors. My first sponsor is Evo, and if you haven't shopped at evo.com or been to one of their stores in Denver, Seattle, or Portland, you are missing out on the best retail and online experience in the country. The stores themselves are created to be a gathering place, an art gallery, a movie venue, and a travel base with the goal of making your adventures more fun. On the web front, Evo offers a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders over $50, and a no-hassle return policy for everything ski, snowboard, bike, skate, lifestyle, and outerwear. On top of that, For listening to the show, they're going to give you an additional 10% off your entire order. When you check out, use the code capital TPM, the number 10, all one word, and you will get that 10% off your order. My next sponsor is Rescue Water, and they are proactive recovery. What does that mean? Think of it like this. When you need a pick-me-up, you drink a soda or a cup of coffee. But when you really need energy, you grab yourself an energy drink. Well, with Rescue Water, it's a similar principle. When you need to hydrate, like when you finish a workout, get done practice, or get off the mountain or trail, skip your sports drink and drink a cold Rescue Water. There's no better choice for replacing electrolytes, and it's a difference that you can feel. I like to drink a cold Rescue Water before bed after big nights out, and it's a lifesaver. Make Rescue Water work for you by heading over to rescuewater.com and save 20% on a 12-pack case by entering the code RESQ Water TPM. That's all one word, and you can find that over at rescuewater.com. And I'm happy to bring on Outdoor Research as a sponsor to the show. I've been wearing their products since I moved to the Northwest in 2000 because it works better than anything else on the market, and they're a Seattle company. OR is committed to improving your experience with exceptional products so you don't have to think about your gear when you're out on your journey. It's not always going to be Bluebird. It's not always going to be deep. But with OR, it's always about keeping the stoke level high and putting exclamation marks on your experiences. When you're shopping for outerwear this winter, make sure you head over to outdoorresearch.com and get 15% off your order with the checkout code POWEL15, all one word and in caps. Those are my sponsors, so we'll get back into it. And when does photos transition into, hey, I'm going to bring my camera to the mountain, or I'm going to bring my camera out skating? And when does that start to be a passion?
Well, after I healed up from my skating injury, I was kind of disenchanted with skateboarding. I hate to say, like, I was pretty bad at skateboarding, and I kind of knew that. And I was like, I really don't want to hurt myself again, take myself out for another year.
Yeah.
And so I turned to snowboarding, and I figured out how to snowboard on the cheap, finally. I started going to Mount Baker. I had a roommate that was driving up all the time, so I didn't need a car. I would just like hitch rides with my buddy. So I was snowboarding for $5 a day, paying like a couple bucks in gas or whatever. Gas is so cheap back then. And then I realized, I was like, wow, I can do this. Like, I had some hand-me-down gear from friends. Yeah, I just made it work. But I think it's kind of interesting too, because like I know a lot of people that's like how they could afford to snowboard back in the day, or even now. There's like there's still ways, or you just go hike and splitboard. You know, there's ways to do it on the cheap. You just have to get resourceful. So I fell in love with snowboarding again, and I kind of started to explore Mount Baker and realized how awesome it is up there. I didn't really ride there for a couple years because it's an ordeal to go snowboarding. Hour and a half drive up, hour and a half drive down. You got to buy a lift ticket. Takes your whole day, basically, if you're trying to go ride for more than like 5 hours. Meeting all the friends up there and like getting thrown into that culture, I was like, wow, there's a lot of cool people up here. And I'm not going to school anymore. I had actually gone back to school at the community college, Whatcom Community College, because my parents were like, you have to finish something. So I was like, cool, I'll get my AA degree. I actually graduated as I was still on crutches from my skate injury, which was like a miracle, graduating on pain meds and crutches. But I finished that, and then I was like, okay, like I started snowboarding again, found my calling in the mountains, and made some friends up there. Somebody suggested to me, you should just work at the mountain. I mean, you love snowboarding so much now, and that's like kind of the only way you can do it a lot and on the cheap, because you get a free season pass and you get, you know, plenty of time to ride, and you're just up there all the time. So that was when I started realizing, yeah, okay, like I can do this. I moved to Glacier. I'll live in Glacier. I'd researched all the jobs and figured out that cooking was probably the best thing for me because I could get mornings off. So like pretty much powder days galore. Like,
did they have a sushi bar or something?
Yeah, I wish. No, it was just flipping burgers in white salmon.
Is the camera pulled out at all at that point, or is this still just passion for snowboarding, figuring out Mount Baker and finding a crew there to shred with?
The camera was getting pulled out, but I mean, I had no access to like pros back then. Like the best riders at Baker didn't want to take the time to shoot a photo. There, it was just go, go, go. You know, the locals, as far as like a lot of the rippers, like dudes like Donkey and that whole crowd. They were just a wild, rambunctious crew that just wanted to, they just didn't want to have to take the time to, stop and take a photo. And I was just all about riding. I mean, I was 20 years old. Back then, in, the early 2000s, snowboarding at Mount Baker was quite a bit different. It wasn't as popular. Well, not as many people knew about it. And so, like, you would kind of have the place to yourself. Everything was kept a secret. So, like, when you did find out about a certain line or a certain zone, if somebody took you there, you weren't allowed to tell anybody. It was more regarded as like a surf mentality.
Locals only?
Yeah, locals only. Like now it's like totally blown out, which is funny because I hear a lot of the people now who like started riding there after me are like, oh, you can't tell someone to go there. I'm like, dude, it's already blown out and you told somebody to go right there. So well, I guess I was really focused on riding and just, I wasn't trying to get sponsored, but I was just really stoked on riding and getting better.
Big lines at Baker? Is that what you're looking for, cliffs and big lines? It's not like a full-on jib mountain by any means. You're finding gnarly shit?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really that gnarly. I was just some mini golf lines and just trying to ride as much POW as possible. A little bit of jumping. Yeah, and then I started working at Mount Hood. I weaseled my way into a job working in a kitchen at Mount Hood because I had this little bit of kitchen experience from Baker. So I was full on like 200 plus days a year on snow, like trying to ride and learn as much as possible. And Mount Hood is kind of where I started to pick up the camera a little more because I was like, okay, wow, like now I have access to all these pros and I'm actually like friends with some of them. So now I can just be like, hey, can I take your photo on that hip or jump? And like there's pretty much every single pro in the world funneling through Mount Hood every summer at some point. So,
and if you're working there, they're going to let you shoot them too.
Yeah, and a lot of the staff was up and coming snowboarders who were either AMs or pros. So you're really spending like a lot of quality time with these people and becoming good friends with them. And so that's where I was like, okay, like this kind of makes sense now. I can like actually get good photos and it's not really like too much of a nightmare to work with these people. And then the following year I came back to Baker and got an even better job. I wasn't really down with flipping burgers, so I was like kind of searching for that next step up, and I got a job at the employee lodge. The schedule was 3.5 days on, 3.5 days off, and then you wake up at 4 a.m, cook breakfast for everybody. You're cleaned up and done with the kitchen at 8 a.m. Get ready, throw on your boots, hike into chair 1, you get first chair up, and you don't have to go back to work till 2:30, 3:30 to start cooking dinner.
Awesome.
So that's insane. Even on your working day, you have a good chunk of 5 hours of riding if you want. So that maximized my riding time even that much more. It was insane. And then that's when I kind of gained my knowledge from Mount Hood. I was like, okay, like I can bring the camera out. And there are like every once in a while, there is a professional rider that I could go out and shoot or even just latch onto the local scene. And I ended up shooting with a lot of the local riders like Donkey, Nate Lind, Matt Ferguson. And then every once in a while I'd see like Think Tank crew around and get to shoot with those guys. But it was almost like I was poaching. I wasn't even part of the crew, like Sean Genovese and Pat McCarthy. And then that next summer I had returned back to Mount Hood. So this is my second summer in Mount Hood. And I kind of vowed I would never do another one because it was insane how little you get paid there. So it was kind of like really hard to make it by, but I ended up landing a job as this dude who shot all the campers had his own freelance business alongside the camp. I was basically employed by him. We were shooting photos of the campers and then like, we'd do quick uploads and they'd come down and click through a gallery and be like, oh, I want that photo. And their parents would like buy it and we'd print them out and send it to them. So I was like, okay, well, that's at least it's a step in the right direction. It's photography. It's what I want to do. And a lot of those kids were actually really good. And then I'd get to shoot the pros after my shift of shooting the campers. So that was definitely a good step in the right direction. And I got a lot better at shooting then. And I befriended Pat McCarthy, he was like, I'm moving to Bellingham. And he was just blowing up at that point. He was kind of like the dude in the Northwest.
Yep.
As far as like a jumper, powder rider. Super motivated, super professional. And he was like, if you ever want to shoot, like, I'm down. Like back then it was really hard to find a photographer in the Northwest. not many people were down. We were still shooting film, so it was really tough in those elements. I mean, you kind of had to only shoot black and white a lot of times in the storm. Like, your slide film wouldn't really turn out too well in the snowy conditions. So yeah, I kind of gravitated towards that black and white feel because that's the only thing that would show up. The following winter, I returned back to Baker, same job, and had all this free time. And I was like, okay, well, I've done a lot of snowboarding in my life by this point. So I was like, I can probably take a little bit of a backseat, shoot some photos, and still like ride a ton. And that's exactly what I did. And just befriended Pat, and I was up there all the time, so it was almost better than the snow report. People would call the snow report, and then they'd call me. And snow reports are notoriously wrong, so I could give people like all these detailed reports. So yeah, I had all these pro riders calling me before the snow report, and then I'd be like, yeah, actually, I actually snowed a foot, not 6 inches, so let's go out and shoot something. So that was kind of like my in.
So in the photography realm, then, you're taking pictures of pros, but there's a process to get these things published if you want. And I think that's every young photographer's goal, is to get these things in a magazine. And whenever you get your first shot in a magazine, you're going to shit your pants and be like, oh, I've made it, only to realize that you have to do that every month to really make it. Are you submitting photographs to magazines? Have you met people on that side where you can actually get your work out there?
I had submitted some stuff to Frequency, which is in Bellingham.
Yep.
At the time, I felt like they had a really cool movement going on. They were much more open to local photographers and just Northwest imagery in general. So I definitely had a good in there. I befriended John Lang, who was interning there and eventually started working there. And so I kind of had like an inside line with him. So I started submitting photos to those guys first. And I think after getting a couple things published just through them, the other mags kind of started to take notice. Back then, there was just a lot less photographers. And if you paid attention, you would see a new name and you'd know right away that like, whoa, who is this person, So it was easier to make a mark back then through the mags by just having 2 or 3 photos, I feel like. And then once I did have photos of more established A-grade riders, I had some team managers help me out writing letters to Transworld or Snowboarder, being like, hey, like vouching, like, hey, this guy's like can take an all right photo. Can you please look at his submission?
So there's some legwork on your end of getting people to ask people to look at your images. There's some behind the scenes politics that has to happen to almost make you accepted.
Yeah, for sure. You can't just jump in there. And granted, this is in the days of film, so you don't really want to send your originals and have somebody not like overlook them, because that's your only copy. You want that back. So if they're not going to use it, you can at least send it to somewhere else, or they're not going to lose it in the mix being like, I don't know who this guy is. Like, that gets just shoved to the side. So it was definitely a process. It was a combination between the riders and like team managers and networking to have people vouch for you. That's just even just to get in the door to get people to look at your stuff. And if it's not good, then you're out. Good luck. So you really want to make sure that first submission strikes a chord. And for some reason, luckily, some of my stuff did. Right place, right time. In the days of film back in the Northwest, there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it. So not a lot of competition for that type of photography. There was a lot of guys in Whistler that were shooting that were super good. There's a lot of guys in Tahoe, Mammoth, and Salt Lake, but there was only a couple guys in Washington that were doing it, and they were good, but there's just not a lot more. I mean, not compared to like 10 or 15 photographers in one town or whatever.
People like to have blue skies, and you have to know in Washington that that's not going to come in play. You might have to be black and white for all your photos, and you just have to be great at shooting that kind of photography because we're in a different world.
Exactly, and it takes somebody to be there every single day of the winter to capitalize on those sunny days, because you can't just plan a week-long trip to Baker and hope that you're going to get sunny skies. So when the sun did pop, I was there. That was huge.
Eventually, you end up landing a gig with K2, and I think it's probably through people you met at Hood that you established relationships with. I think K2 is like your first real gig.
Yeah.
How does that one come together?
After my second year at Hood, working for the photography guy, I've kind of vowed just never to do that again, because Mount Hood is a great place to make relationships, but it's just not a good place to make money.
Yeah.
And it's just as far as my photography habit and what I want to do as far as traveling, gear and all that stuff. I needed some sort of capital. And so I shifted gears for the summers, and I had a friend who got me a job working with the Forest Service, which is not really making that much money, but it was probably 10, 20 times what I was making at Mount Hood.
Yeah, and you probably get benefits too.
Yeah, and the option too to fight fire, wildland fire. So I was trained in that. That's when you can really make the big bucks, is doing those firefighting jobs.
You can also die easily too.
Yeah, you can die easily, but they take so many precautions. There was only one time I was actually like in a forest fire and looking around. All the trees were on fire around me. So yeah, I segued into that for the summers and kind of used that to try and save as much as I can just to afford to shoot and snowboard and travel as much as I could. And I think I was into my second year of that. When I got the offer, the interview with K2, they were looking for a new photographer. I think they had just lost their staff photographer and they were looking for a new guy. My friend Sean McKay put my name in the hat. He was going pro for K2 at the time. And I had a loose relationship with some of the riders. I knew Leanne Pelosi through High Cascade. I had shot with Vile a little bit during one of the Volcom videos, just freelancing at Baker. And we got a bunch of stuff published. So I had like 3 riders on the pro team that knew who I was and had shot with me and liked my style or whatever. And so definitely had kind of an upper hand in there and just being local. I knew that they were interviewing a couple guys, but they were from out of state and they'd have to move. And so, yeah, it's actually, looking back, it's kind of a miracle they hired me, because I kind of didn't know what I was doing at all.
It's like you did that Hood thing and it sucked for you for a couple of years, but it created a ton of relationships. And while you had no idea maybe what you were doing in terms of photography at that level, by creating all those relationships and deciding you were going to be a photographer, you had already set your path, so nothing was going to stop you. And then once you get in the door at K2, I mean, sure, you're going to make the amount of money that a fast food manager will make, maybe a little less. You're going to work a lot harder than them. But once you have that on your resume, I mean, you're an established photographer, I would think, once you're able to say, hey, I've shot action, I've shot studio photography, I've shot portraits, everything this brand could possibly want. One of the biggest brands in the world of snowboarding, and I am responsible for all their photography. You're a full-on photographer at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And it was cool that they wanted somebody who could shoot everything, because that really pushed me. I had never shot a catalog or products or...
I can guarantee they never thought that they wanted someone who could shoot everything. They're like, we're going to hire a staff photographer. And then they were like, oh shit, we need this photograph too. How many more days do we have of Yosh? Oh yeah, we'll have him do all the studio stuff too. Or we'll have him do these shots as well.
Yeah, and it was funny too, because when I did get the gig, that first catalog, I was so gung-ho that they had me shoot all the ski stuff too. So I shot 2 catalogs that first year. And I just remember Jeff Matura, the VP of marketing, at the very end of all that, he was like, wow, I'm so impressed with you. This is amazing. And so, yeah, I just made a good impression with him, and we had many good years together for sure. K2 was great.
You had to have a great relationship with everybody at K2, because when you would come in to shoot photos, now, I don't know if other brands do this, but when you would come to K2 to shoot, K2 would be waiting on products to come from their factories, and they wouldn't all be there. So it was kind of like, Yosh is coming, and hopefully all the products will be here, but if they're not, Yosh is just going to wait and shoot other stuff. And it seemed like you would show up maybe August 15th, and you would live in the warehouse until September 15th, about 30 days it seemed like you were there. You'd probably spend a few nights at Jared's house, Jared Garrison, who worked at K2, but you were sleeping in a tent that you built under the basketball hoop, which really impeded my games of horse every day. Did you think there was anything wrong with that at the time?
Maybe that comes from my Alaskan background, just the rough around the edges, like snowboarder lifestyle. But like when there's a job you need to get done, you just do it. I was just fine with that. I mean, now that I'm older, maybe I would like get a hotel room or something. But yeah, I was not making a ton of money at the time still. I did not want to drive back and forth between Bellingham and Seattle like a couple times a week. I just made the most of it. I enjoyed being down there. I enjoyed the people in the office. And it was kind of nice to get out of Bellingham 1 month out of the year just to kind of see something a little different and enjoy like a bigger city culture, I guess.
Being a photographer, you're not going to make a shit ton of money there. But travel budget-wise, it's almost unlimited. It's where are you going to go shoot with people? What are your trips going to be? And K2 is paying, I would think, every penny of every expense that went through. At least that's what we did for the ski guys. If we didn't for the snowboard guy, that would suck for you. But how much do you think you were able to spend in travel budget over the years? Like in a great year with K2, were you spending 30 grand on traveling?
No, I don't think so. I think I was probably at the most like 15. I mean, I wasn't really that extravagant, and I would always kind of stay within my means when traveling.
Well, I was just thinking that you'd be gone for a long time. Our guys wouldn't spend more than they should spend. Alex O'Brien would be on the road for 3 months, and when he came back from 3 months of hotels and bullshit, it was like 15 grand for that trip, and then he'd have another one later on.
Well, I had the luxury of shooting at home a lot. Sean McKay was based in Bellingham in the winters, and he was kind of like my go-to guy. Anything K2 wanted, any little thing we needed to shoot, he would always say yes. So it was like pretty easy to shoot with him. And then Ville was in the Northwest. He was based out of Portland. I mean, the furthest we would go is either Cook City or maybe Whistler, which is super close to my house. We just made it easy. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of jibbers on the team, so we could get all the jibbing done pretty quick in 1 or 2 quick trips. The rest was mostly based around the Northwest. I never really went too many places international with K2.
Well, that's your fault.
I would go on my own trips international, but yeah, it would have been nice to do it on their dime.
I think you do K2 for like 4 or 5 years, I believe. You get to the point where you are an established photographer with a stream of income coming in. You're able to buy a house. And the house for me is something that's really funny to me because back in the day, you and I used to make some jokes that aren't really as appropriate today. And the only thing I can really say other than my sushi reference earlier was you bought a house in Bellingham. What street did you buy it on?
Oriental Avenue.
So funny that you would happen to buy a house on Oriental Avenue because I don't think people even use the word Oriental anymore.
I've probably gotten 30 comments on that over the years of just people cracking up on that street name, for sure.
You first start competing in 2010, and I'm going to call you a competitive photographer in this just because I've never heard that term before, but you're in the Red Bull Allume, and what the fuck is that?
Yeah, Red Bull, I think every 3 years they put on this contest, and randomly I was on a photo shoot with another photographer, and he was like, you should enter this contest. And I was like, yeah, I'm not really that guy, competitive contest guy, but I kind of gave it some thought, and I was like, yeah, why not? Just throw a couple images, you just upload to a site. And I think they go through like the ridiculous amount of images. It's something like 30 or 40,000 photos. And they have all these crazy categories that you can enter. I think it's like 8 different categories. But anyways, entered a couple photos, and I think a couple of them made them into like a category final. And then from there, they pick the final of each category, and then there's like an overall winner. It gets put into a book, and they put it on their website and do all this stuff. It's gotten crazier over the years. Now they do these traveling shows with like these huge light boxes and stuff. But yeah, I guess I never really thought about that. Yeah, I guess I'm a competitor.
It's one of those things where you're not usually putting yourself in front of the camera. And
right.
When you enter these contests, given they're not images of you up there, but you are putting a face to the shots on those images, and hey, I'm the guy that took them. Does that get you nervous at all when you're putting your stuff up against other photographers, or you not even care?
Oh, I mean, I don't really even care because you're just putting it on a website and then you just forget about it. There's not much pressure unless it's just pressure that you're putting on yourself.
When you enter your next contest in 2011, you're in the TELUS Pro Photo Showdown, which is like the biggest event at the World Ski and Snowboard Festival in Whistler every year. And it's always the hardest ticket to get in Whistler. And does that put you even more in the spotlight at that contest? Because it's a little bit more in person, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. No, that one was kind of gnarly. If any of you have been to one of those things, it's like a full-on rock show or something. There's this crazy auditorium with a circular screen like surrounding this whole like 360-degree screen where there's like 4 different screens on each side. So yeah, it's gnarly, and it was definitely an honor. I think it was kind of like the right time for me to get in there because it was maybe a little bit of a lesser known competition. Like nowadays, I feel like it's way gnarlier. Like the level of photography has been raised so high. But I went to the first one. The first one I went to was, I think, the year prior, maybe 2009, 2010. And I was up there for the Grenade Games. and I had gotten a ticket to that show, and I saw Brian Bielman, the surf photographer. I watched him win, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is a really cool outlet and a really cool way of showing your work. So randomly applied for it, and yeah, I made the finals 2011, and it was crazy. Like, my parents flew in, and it's just a scene, and just going up there and talking in front of all those people, like introducing your show, was definitely scary. Like, I'm not the biggest public speaker, but honestly, like, when you get up there, there's so many lights shining on you that when you look out in the crowd, you don't really see any faces. And that dude, Mike Douglas, I think, that
Skier?
yeah, that guy who's the MC for that thing is hilarious. So it's a good time.
I think it must be Mike Atkinson, because I don't think Mike Douglas is hilarious. Sorry, Mike, if you're listening.
Oh yeah, my bad. Mike Atkinson. I can't remember his name. I know it was Mike something.
Mike Atkinson's a hilarious MC up there. Mike Douglas is a non-hilarious skier who's like a legend. Who I'm going to interview next week up there.
Oh, nice.
So we've established that you are a competitive photographer. Not too many people are competitive, but you were going lens to lens with a lot of other photographers out there. You had the Red Bull Illume. You had the Tellus Festival. You didn't win either of those. But there's another contest, probably the biggest contest in the entire world, especially at this point, the X Games. And you're in the X Games photography contest. And what happens there?
I won. It was pretty surreal, actually. It's just all online voting, and that was during the Winter X Games 2 years ago, and that's the first time they started doing this contest. It's called the X Games Zoom contest, and they have like a monthly photo gallery where people submit photos, and they pick the best ones and put them online. At the end of the year, they choose like 5 of those out of like whatever, 50 photos, 60 photos, and then those get put into a ballot, and people during the X Games vote for these photos. And luckily, I won that one. So definitely stoked to have that X Games gold medal. And it was the first one they had. So definitely an honor to be the first guy.
So you have an X Games gold medal. Did they have any awards at the X Games for you?
I wasn't actually at that X Games, but they just like announced it on TV.
So they said your name on TV. They send you a medal. Is there any prize that goes with it, or just the medal?
I won 10 grand.
Oh, awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Do they enter you in this contest now every year since you're the inaugural winner?
No, not quite. I still have yet to be in another one. I think there's been 4 now. Hoping soon.
All right, so that's your competitive days. And now I'm going to jump into my second set of sponsors. And Spy Optic has been independent since '94 and taking a playful approach to everything they create. They're killing it on the innovation game with their new electrochromic one lens technology. If you haven't heard about the Ace EC goggle, it packs the power of 3 lenses into one by changing tints with the touch of a button. It's crazy innovation that creates one goggle for any light. It's the best goggle on the market, period. Check out spyoptic.com for all the details on the game-changing EC, as well as their newest athlete signature models. And for listening to the show, Spy is going to give you 20% off when you head over to spyoptic.com. When you check out, use the code capital TPM, the number 20, all one word, and you'll get that 20% off. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They are all about drinking beer outside and supporting snow sports and culture. And this year, they are doing something that no beer has ever done before. They're not only creating Pray for Snow parties in their pubs that are going to be like no other, they've also produced their own ski and snowboard film, Pray for Snow, featuring riders like Ben Ferguson, Eric Jackson, and Lucas Walks. The world premiere is September 29th in Portland, Oregon, and it is going to be a party. For a full tour schedule and more information on the beers and the pubs, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors, so we'll get right back into it. And when you go out in the backcountry or when you go out anywhere, all photographers need to be mountain men, I feel like. You're going to be out there in the elements. It's going to be miserable. You're going to be on sleds riding with some of the best people on sleds in the world, and you have to be able to keep up. Now, when I look at you, you don't fit the mold of your traditional mountain man just from first look. How do you do out there in the elements, and are there ever times where you're like, I need to get the fuck out of here?
I fared well. When I used to own a sled, I was a lot better. Nowadays, in the mountains, I do well. Like hiking, it's fine. Like did some ridiculous hikes that pushed my limits. This winter, it was 7-hour hike. Sledding's always a challenge. I'm not the best sledder. I had been maybe a little bit better years ago, but nowadays I'm renting a sled. That's the hard part, is you just don't know what sled you're going to get. Sometimes you get a really nice one. Sometimes you get one that's not so nice, and you have to adapt and learn and figure out how to ride a sled all over again. It's different when you have your gear and you have your own stuff and you know it so well, season in and out. But yeah, I fare good enough. I can get to the places that I want to. Definitely have to give props to all the riders, have patience with me and help me get dug out.
Right.
But yeah, that's just part of it. And it's super rewarding and fun when you do get that shot. So it's definitely worth it.
When you get out into some crazy remote location where, there's not going to be medical care right there, and if something goes down, it's usually a serious manner right away. Have you ever been in that situation where you're in the middle of nowhere and someone gets hurt?
Yeah. Actually, I was in Idaho on a shoot, and a guy, we built this jump and he hit it, and you could just tell in the air he was coming down wrong, caught his edge and went straight to his neck, and he slid down the landing, lifeless, screaming. He's complaining about his back and his spine. So somebody had a satellite phone. We called for a EMT helicopter to come pick him up, just try to do the best we could, marking the landing zone and comforting him and telling him not to move and all that stuff. And yeah, we got out of there and he was okay. He ended up walking out of the hospital that day, just ruptured his spleen, and that was it.
Well, that can be a killer right there.
Yeah.
So it's good you guys did what you did. In those situations where you've got other riders, you've got some people in your crew out there, is the role of the cameraman or the filmer, are you still documenting, or is there a time to stop shooting?
I mean, I don't know. It's a fine line. It's cool to document that stuff for sure. If the person isn't fatally injured, but you kind of want to just have all hands on deck if there's something really gnarly going down, or if it's you're trying to get somebody out of a burial or something. Obviously just cameras aside and you're just going to be shoveling. But
yeah,
I kind of a little sensitive on shooting people if they're really fucked up. Maybe that's just me, I don't know.
If you're asking me, yeah, you don't shoot that whatsoever, but I'm not a photographer. Your job is to document the action or what's happening, and
Exactly.
Sometimes that's part of the story. And while it seems like a bad person would not put the camera down, sometimes that's your job, is to hold the camera. So I was just curious how you felt about that.
Yeah, I mean, you think about those war photographers, those guys are just shooting everything nonstop down to people dying, which is that's just gnarly, but that's just documentation. But yeah, I like to document, but at the same time, if it's a little too sensitive or out there, I'm probably not going to shoot it.
And nowadays, you work for a company called 10, the Enthusiast Network. And to me, it's really interesting because you have tons of great people that work for the brand, and it's been mainly print focused over the years. And I used to love print. There was a time when I spent $40-50 a month on print. And it's crazy to me nowadays that I don't spend a penny on print because I just don't. And it's not because I don't like it. There's other avenues for me to get my media from. And being that you're in the print world with digital footprints as well, what do you see the future of print right now from your perspective?
It's really hard to say. I'd like to think that print in some aspect is always going to be around, because it is really nice to have something tangible to hold and take your time to slow down and actually read things and take time to look at photos with your own eyes instead of a digital screen. But it's really hard to tell. I mean, with our company, we're diversifying in all aspects as far as digital, social, and print. And I feel like every year print keeps on being a smaller part of that. But the most important part is that we're actually trying to diversify and spread our wings in all avenues, whether it be events or digital and social, to kind of offset that print cost.
You're a dinosaur if you don't diversify. And I think you've
Exactly.
seen it probably with a couple of your titles that aren't around anymore.
Exactly.
And it's even crazy that some of your magazines you give away, I believe.
Yeah, Snowboarder is a free magazine. If you go to shops, you can get a free copy. But I mean, that's a limited amount.
Okay.
You're not really guaranteed a copy. But we just started doing a season's pass thing where you get all 3 issues, a t-shirt, a DVD, a hat, all this stuff. So that's kind of like the package deal if you want a guaranteed issue.
Another magazine in your wheelhouse, which you probably have nothing to do with, but I get it sent to me all the time, is Powder. And I pulled off the little mailing thing so I could see the sticker price on the magazine now, because the Snowboard magazine is free unless you sign up for your season pass. But Powder's charging $10 for a magazine, which to me is like, do I want a gram of weed, a 12-pack of beer, or a magazine? And in that decision now, I'm never going to pick the magazine just because I like weed and beer.
Pick your poison. I mean, there's people that are going to buy it for sure, but it's definitely interesting to see like where people's heads are at as far as what they will spend their money on. And you just got to diversify and hope for the best.
Do you have a role in Transworld as well?
Not anymore. Just solely snowboarder at this point.
Because there was a weird time where you were with both publications, which historically, if you looked at both publications, it seemed like Transworld was the one that had like 600 ads and Snowboarder was the one that had more content that I wanted to read.
Right.
They've kind of changed over time, but you were working with both. Was there any conflict of interest or anything weird for you doing that?
It was actually pretty sweet. I pretty much shot all of Transworld's product last year, and they do like a lot of product online and in their magazines.
Okay.
And I was shooting Snowboarder's product, which is quite a bit smaller amount. That was pretty much my role as far as like the summertime production months go. That's how we make the magazines, is we shoot all winter, and then during the summer months, we produce the magazines and plug in all the assets that we shot all winter. But yeah, we've just been going through a restructuring, and that just kind of made the most sense because I had that skill set and I just landed there. Since then, we've restructured again, and now I'm just working more as a photo editor for Snowboarder, which is great too, but it's just a little different. And I'm kind of thankful to be able to like bounce around a little bit in job positions because it keeps things fresh. And if I was just doing the same job every year in and year out, I would get pretty bored, honestly.
With the restructures, there's another really weird one because they lay off a lot of people and you're in that layoff round, but then a month later you're back. And is that really strange to you as well?
Yeah, kind of odd. Because it's just a transition period where a lot of things were changing, and with the corporations, you don't really have control over what the dude upstairs is going to say. I've seen it happen a lot in snowboarding. For instance, Nike snowboarding, from what I understand, it was profitable, but it just wasn't profitable enough.
Yeah.
Since then, it's changed, and people are a little more open-minded because why get rid of something that's profitable? Why not just try and build on that or tweak it or whatever to just try and make it more profitable? Yeah, it was definitely a hard time, but I stuck with it, and I'm happy where I'm at now. So I can't say that it was a bad decision to stick around.
And you're the social media manager as well for Snowboarder, I think, for maybe like the past 4 years or so. Is that right?
Basically, when Instagram started to get pretty big around 2011-ish, or whenever it's kind of started up, I knew that we had an account. It wasn't really getting used much. And I just saw that opportunity, told my boss, I was like, hey, I'm going to just start like posting a bunch of stuff on this thing because it seems like a really cool thing that we should invest in. And yeah, it grew massively. I mean, I think we're at 1.2 million followers now. So that's just insane to think about. But after like our restructuring and stuff, I kind of took a step back from that. And now I'm helping out a little bit with Instagram, but not like Facebook or any other social media platforms. I'm just helping out with the photo side of it.
I only ask because I create some snowboard content every once in a while. And when I do, it's fucking awesome. If I can bring the names up, it would be Pat Bridges, who I believe is the guru of your world. He's probably the Yoda of snowboarding and works in your building.
Yeah.
Bo's Nuts, Mikey LeBlanc, John Cardiel, Liam Pelosi, Scott Stevens. I put up one up with Mike Rankwit, who you guys have never run an interview with. How do I get my shit posted through you guys so I can tell some snowboard stories to some people that haven't heard them before?
I don't know, man. I'll put in a good word for you.
That's all I can ask for.
Yeah.
Speaking of good words, we're at the last part of the show, and I had a guy who you're good friends with, Sean McKay. I talked to him, and he put together the inappropriate questions for you.
Oh, great.
Sean was a longtime snowboarder at K2. He was one of your great friends. He sounds like he put the word in for you to get your job. So you owe a lot to Sean, and
definitely owe a lot to Sean.
And you can repay him with these answers. I think his inappropriate questions were good. You know Mike Yoshida. You've traveled with him all over the world. Maybe not all over the world. I don't know, nor do I care where you've traveled with him. But you should have a good feel for who he is, and you should be able to make him squirm a little bit, I'm hoping. So do you have inappropriate question number 1 ready for Mike?
Yeah. It's kind of interested to get his take on like who his favorite person to shoot with would be and why. And then a counter question of who is his least favorite person to shoot with and why.
Oh, man, there are so many.
I've got a gun to your head. Everyone in your family is going unless you tell me the one favorite person that you want to shoot with.
Wow, I'd really have to think about that.
You only have 10 seconds or I'm pulling the trigger.
You know, I would have to say it would probably be Pat McCarthy or Jesse Bertner because they're just such close friends and the experience is always so hilarious, laughing the whole time. And the shots always turn out great. But more importantly, just that experience and that camaraderie of just like going out and shooting. And there's not one single second where you think that's a job or that it's work at all.
That's awesome.
That's like the happy zone that you want to be in, ideally, if everything goes perfect.
And what is the zone you don't want to be in? Who is that one person that you might like them, but you didn't like shooting with them?
Oh, man. Geez, that's even a tougher question. You know, a lot of these riders, they're there for a reason. It's because they've been vetted and they get weeded out. And by the time they get to me, they're professional and easy to work with.
You never get one that slips through the cracks that's just super lazy, doesn't want to shovel, doesn't want to do anything?
I don't think I hate anybody that I've shot with.
Well, you don't have to hate them, but I mean, if you're to go out somewhere and you guys need to build a feature and that person thinks he's too good to help build the feature or that person's just busy smoking weed the whole time and not helping, then I would think they create more work for you and the rest of the crew and maybe you don't want to shoot with them again. I don't think it has to do with hating anybody.
Right. I guess now it's not that, this particular person is one of my favorites actually. But for some reason, when I shot with him, not saying that he's a bad person or not hardworking, but Justin Benny, when I shot with him, I think he was just in a weird spot in his career/life. And it was street snowboarding. We were going all over the place. And he just didn't want to hit anything, really. He just always kind of find a way out of it. Granted, he did try and snowboard a couple times, and it was like it was really gnarly, but we never really got a shot on like a 10-day trip.
I think that says it all there. If you don't get a shot on a 10-day trip and it's not purely weather dependent, then...
And then to top it all off, at the very end, the last thing he did when he actually like really focused and tried to hit something, he got hurt. That was horrible.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah. But I love Benny. He's one of my favorite snowboarders of all time, I think.
Okay. You like the dude, it's just you didn't have a good trip.
Yeah, we had a bad trip.
All right, here we go with question number 2.
So I feel like snowboarding's kind of lost its way a little. People seem less interested. They're giving the mags away. So I just wanted to get his kind of take on what's wrong with snowboarding and can it get back to its roots of being a cool sport?
Now that Sean is not in the spotlight anymore, there's something wrong with snowboarding. He wants to know what you think is wrong with snowboarding and how to get it back on track.
I think that snowboarding's fine. I think that it just needs... I think it's not snowboarding. I think it's all the other things that are out there that people are starting to do.
I agree with you.
That are latching on to, like, I'm trying to think of that freaking game that everyone plays.
Fortnite?
Yeah, like just stuff like that. It's just like...
Do you know people that play Fortnite?
I know some people, yeah, for sure. Definitely. There's things like that. Who knows with virtual reality? That's not going to help any sport out.
No, I think the numbers for everything, there's just so many more choices than there were.
Everything goes through cycles and ups and downs, and I think maybe snowboarding, I think it's actually coming out of a down cycle. Give it a couple of years and things can turn around. The main thing is like people need to be able to do it easily. We need to have good winters and it needs to be affordable. And same reasons why I didn't snowboard for so long when I was younger. It just like, I just felt like it wasn't affordable. So there needs to be a good, accessible way for people to get up there and at a good cost. And maybe it's just like more people are splitboarding or hiking or something like that. But whatever it is, it needs to be accessible.
I agree with you. With those games, they're free downloads and you can play for like 4 years. With snowboarding, you need to pay $80 to $120 a day just to get your 8 hours on the hill.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want it bad enough, like I wanted it, you can make it work. You can go work at a mountain. You know, you can go hike a mountain. You can make it work. You just really need to want it bad enough. So using the cost as a pure excuse is not enough.
Okay, and here's the final inappropriate question.
I know he's a photo editor now, and so you always got to assume there's a handful of politics that go into those guys choosing photos. So I kind of wanted to see if he'd give us a little bit of insight as to if that does exist and what external factors he has to consider looking at two different images and deciding which one goes in.
I'm going to add on to that one, the whole helmet thing, which I've had a lot of conversations with people about. And a lot of the pro athletes think helmets, you can't wear them because you'll never get a photo published in a magazine if you do. That's one reason people don't wear them. And if I'm going to do some gnarly street thing, I'm not going to wear my helmet. I think, Chris Duffy did it back in the day, but everybody forgot about him after he hurt his head when he wasn't wearing a helmet.
Now if people wear them, they try to wear something over it and make it not look as bad.
Yeah, and does he feel any responsibility as a photo editor by not putting those images in with helmets? Does he feel like he is contributing to brain injuries of snowboarders all over the world?
Yeah, that's a good one for him.
So there we go. The first part is what goes into selecting a photo. You've got two photos. They're both great. Maybe you know one guy, maybe you don't. Maybe one of the guys is on a brand that gets the inside cover. Does any politics like that play into it? Or is it you just picking the photo that's better in your mind?
You know, I've been photo editors just starting this season, so it's fairly new to me. I just picked the best photo thus far. I mean, we definitely try and lean towards using staff photographers a little more just because it offsets the cost.
Yep.
And that's just kind of the way it goes. Everybody does that. Unfortunately, you can't just always use the awesome contributor photos. Other than that, I don't know. I try and diversify like street and powder, but as far as like type of rider or brand, it doesn't really bother me like who's riding what. And as far as like the helmet thing goes, there's really not that many people wearing helmets these days as far as pro riders, but I have no problem whatsoever using a photo. I think the whole "you're lame if you wear a helmet" type deal, I feel like that's kind of like gone away, like, and people respect it a lot more. Just like, if you're going to wear a helmet, that's fine.
I'll say that I'm part of the problem. When I look at the photos, they look cooler without the helmet. It just looks more free. You're not wearing a bulky piece of plastic on your head. So I do like the way the images look, but I feel like if I were to send anybody out on a trip with a photographer and they were going to be shooting a rail, I would never tell them not to wear it because that's not right. But at the same time, I would be thinking to myself, like, well, we're never going to get a photo from this shoot because this guy's wearing a helmet.
Yeah, no, I think that, I don't know. For me personally, like, I don't care as much anymore unless somebody's wearing like a massive helmet and it makes them look kind of weird when they're like on an obstacle or whatever. But like nowadays, I think helmets have gotten like a little more stylish, a little more acceptable. And like, especially if it's like a backcountry shot or a big line, like you're not even gonna see that thing anyway. So like that stuff's totally fine. It's just like, I guess it's more of the street stuff. And I've just gotten more accustomed to seeing it. Yeah, by all means, people wear helmets. Like there's no reason not to. It's not going to affect anything else.
Well, I would say that this is from across a bunch of different sports. Different athletes just felt like they couldn't wear helmets in certain stuff because they wouldn't get photos published. And they were quick to put the blame on magazine editors, not by name of anybody. And it wasn't even in snowboarding that we were talking about this. But it's funny to see what the athlete perception is and then to hear your perception. And you're the new photo editor. So it's all kind of new to you, but it's a refreshing perspective as well.
Yeah.
And Mike, that's our podcast, man. Your career, it's one every kid should look at because you don't need college. You don't need a lot of things. You need a passion for something that you love. And then you find your Mount Hood or you find wherever that passion is based around and you make sure you meet everybody within that world. And you pretty much made a career happen. For a dude that has no training in photography other than being half Japanese, you are killing it in the world of professional photography. And it's just for persistence and tenacity. So kids, follow your passion, find where everything's going on around your passion, and make them hire you. And that's it, man. I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So that was time with Mike Yoshida. And on paper, Mike Yoshida should not be sitting at the desk he is. But life is not lived on paper. Mike hustled his ass off, making sure he met the right people and surrounded himself with things he loved. And I've always been a believer in, if you surround yourself with things you love, good things will happen. While that doesn't really apply for drug addicts, it does apply for those that are addicted to sliding on snow. And Mike had that addiction and took his passion and made it his life. So, cool story of a dude who made something happen. Now, it's time for me to ask you to do a few things for me. First, I'd like for you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. And it's gotten easier than ever to do so. So if you're on an iPhone, it only takes a minute, and here's what you need to do. Go to Podcasts on your iPhone or iTunes, search for The Powell Movement, scroll down to where you see the stars, hit 5 stars, and you're done. I thank you so much for doing it, and thank you for listening. My final thank you goes out to my great sponsors who make this show happen. They are Evo, Rescue Water, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Outdoor Research, and Spy Optics. Have a great week, everyone.